Welcome to Fiction Mage. Tonight, we invite you to settle in, breathe deeply, and begin a quiet journey through a world of imagination, memory, and beloved characters. Let the story guide you gently, one scene at a time, toward rest. This is an unofficial, transformative story, written and assembled by a human author with the help of artificial intelligence. All original characters and worlds belong to their respective creators. Now, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the reading. If this story helped you relax, dream, or simply enjoy a peaceful moment, please like the video and subscribe to Fiction Mage for more stories. During our last meeting, Bluebell was exhausted after a long day at the Demoiselle Café, with festival preparations still weighing on her mind. Just as the cafe was closing, Adrian VII arrived after dealing with trouble on the northern road. To Bluebell's surprise, he asked her to join him for a walk by the canal. Though she hesitated at first, she eventually agreed. During their quiet evening together, Bluebell discovered a gentler side of Adrian, and by the time she returned home, something in her had begun to change. Now, on to the next chapter. The Blue Flower, a fanfiction from Final Fantasy VII. Part 1, The Tiny Bud. Chapter 7, A Tower Above Midgar. Saturday came in through Bluebell's window with the shameless confidence of someone who knew a secret. The canal below had not yet taken the color of morning. It lay between the houses in a narrow band of grey, catching the first pale glimmer along the ropes where the gondolas slept. The flower boxes on the sill held their leaves very still. Somewhere in the square, the Mako tank hummed as it always did, patient, buried inside the hour. Nothing had changed. The same room, the same chair with a folded work dress over its back, the same sewing table, the same saucer of blue buttons, the same 2 wooden boxes of Queen's blood cards keeping their quiet kingdom on the shelf. And yet, Bluebell woke smiling. That was the first betrayal. She discovered it before she opened her eyes fully, a small warmth at the corners of her mouth, as if some part of her had been awake all night, entertaining itself without permission. The second betrayal came when she remembered why. Adrian turning at the corner, Adrian saying her name without Miss Parks in front of it. Adrian's hands, warm and careful, asking and releasing, the canal air in her hair, the promise of tomorrow evening, which was now tonight, which was a fact so large it made the ceiling look insufficient. Monsieur noticed at once and disapproved. He sat on the blanket near her knees, upright and severe, his tuxedo chest white in the half-light. His tail gave one slow beat against the quilt. "What?" Bluebell whispered. He blinked. "I have not done anything," she added joyfully. Monsieur looked toward the door, then back at her, presenting the obvious legal argument that breakfast had not yet appeared. "You are very hard on my happiness this morning," she remarked. His ears twitched at the word, perhaps because happiness sounded like something that might delay fish. Bluebell pushed herself upright. She had slept poorly, but the poor sleep had not bruised her. It had shone under her skin in strange little pieces. She could remember waking once because the wind had touched the window. Once because Monsieur had placed a paw on her throat, as if checking whether she still belonged to him, and once because her own heart had repeated good night, Adrian, in a tone that was not helpful to rest. She rose, washed, and dressed in the pale blue cotton she wore for work. The apron waited on the chair, folded with its strings tucked inward. She lifted it. For a second, the cloth seemed almost amused by her. Yesterday, the knot had held the day closed. This morning, the day did not wish to be held. It slipped and rustled and looked at her from every corner of the room with a foolish lantern behind its back. Bluebell tied the apron anyway. Once for the cloth, once for the day. Her fingers were steady, but she was not fooled by them. Monsieur trotted ahead of her, down the corridor. Her father's door remained shut. Paco's door was open a crack, the room beyond dark and empty, which meant he was already below. Bluebell looked at the narrow line of shadow where his door failed to meet the frame, and thought, with a pang, gentle enough to be mistaken for kindness, that he would probably smell the morning coffee before she did. Paco always moved toward coffee, as if it owed him a family debt. She descended into the cafe. The demoiselle slept in its familiar posture. Chairs raised, floor cool, windows dulled by dawn, porcelain figurines smiling from the mantel, as if they had witnessed human foolishness for generations and expected nothing better. The chalkboard still listed yesterday's final promises in Bluebell's careful hand: coffee, honey tea, butter pastry, peach tart, garden salad, lemon biscuits. She would need to add the festival sample cakes by noon. She would need to check the eggs. She would need to ask Laris whether the raspberry syrup had been counted. She would need, most importantly, to stop thinking of the way Adrian had looked pleased, simply because she had admitted to a good time. She failed at the last task before reaching the kitchen. Paco stood at the stove with his sleeves rolled, coaxing flame under the kettle. His hair was tied badly at the nape and already escaping. He glanced over his shoulder when she entered. "You are late," he said. Bluebell stopped. "I am not." "No," he continued, considering her with exaggerated care. "But you did not arrive early enough to accuse the sun of laziness. That counts as late for you." "I will inform the sun of your standards," she replied. "Please do," added Paco. "We have never understood each other." She crossed to the prep table and began arranging flour, bowls, butter, and the basket of early strawberries from Oliver's farm. The strawberries were small, sweet, and quick to bruise. She lifted one by the stem and set it aside for Monsieur, who had appeared in the doorway with the silent inevitability of a tax. "Do not reward him," Paco said. "He threatened me earlier." "With what?" she asked. "His opinion," Paco answered in a mock-serious tone. "Be lucky you survived to that," she asserted, quick as a flash. Paco watched her place the strawberry on a saucer. His gaze remained on her a fraction longer than usual. Bluebell turned to the flour sack before he could find words. She measured 3 cups for morning scones, then a 4th, because Saturday had appetites of its own. Her hand moved through the flour with the old knowledge. Scoop, level, pour, scoop, level, pour. Butter into cubes, salt between fingers, sugar in a white hill. Halfway through rubbing butter into flour, she heard herself humming. The sound was small, hardly more than breath with intentions. It might have been a thread from Akira's song, stretched thin after sleeping in her hair all night. It might have been nothing at all. Bluebell stopped at once. Paco's head turned slowly. She looked down at the bowl. The butter is soft. How dare you accuse the butter of such thing? Paco wondered with humor. It should have been colder, she said in a concerned tone. Bluebell, what? She asked. He leaned one hip against the stove, studying her with the solemnity of a scholar discovering that a teapot had written philosophy overnight. What's on your mind? What are you talking about? She asked back. Stop your nonsense and make sure the oven is ready. You were humming, he pointed out to her. People hum sometimes, are they not now? Said Bluebell, trying to deflect the conversation. Yes, Paco admitted. Sailors, drunkards, Liana, when she wants someone to ask why she is pleased with herself. But you hum only when pastry has obeyed, or when a customer has left exact change without turning it into a performance. Then perhaps this morning is especially well behaved, Bluebell said. Paco's mouth curved, not his ordinary grin, bright as a thrown coin, but something softer and less certain. Perhaps. Bluebell bent over the bowl and attacked the butter with unnecessary dedication. The flour accepted her secret without comment. Flour was merciful that way. It covered evidence. The cafe opened into Saturday with all the grace of a market cart losing a wheel. By 8, the front bell had rung 16 times, the coffee pot had emptied twice, and Monsieur had been removed from the windowsill because a child believed he was part of the decor and tried to feed him a ribbon. A pair of merchants argued over whether toxirets were worse than levrikins, which Bluebell found unfair to both species and said so only inside her own head. A woman from the festival committee arrived with 6 questions about the demoiselle's planned stall and left with 8 questions because Laris, in a moment of civic generosity, suggested spiced lemonade. Bluebell worked. She carried plates, warmed cups, cut scones, corrected the chalkboard, smiled at old Mrs. Pellier, and poured honey tea for tourists who had seen Midgar only from a distance, and spoke of it as though it were a story one could visit, purchase, and leave behind by supper. Her discipline remained. She knew where every tray belonged, which tables needed shade, which customer would complain that the butter was too cold and then ask for more. Only the sharpness had softened. The morning touched her and did not bruise. When a spoon rolled off the counter, she picked it up without sighing. When Laris misplaced the list for the festival sample cakes, she remembered she had tucked it beneath the blue ledger and did not mention that he had watched her do it. When Paco carried a stack of cups from the wash basin and one slipped from the top, striking the stone floor with a crack like a tiny white firework, Bluebell did not flinch. The room flinched for her. Paco froze with the remaining cups clutched in both hands. 3 customers looked up. Monsieur, who had been pretending not to sleep beneath table 2, opened both eyes with theatrical outrage. Porcelain lay scattered across the floor in white crescents. Bluebell set down the plate she was carrying, fetched the little broom and a pan, and knelt beside the ruin. Careful, she said. There are sharp edges. Paco stared at her. Bluebell, I broke a cup. Yes, she conceded calmly. It obviously has made a clear statement. That was one of the blue-rimmed cups, he reminded her, with an astonished and incongruous tone. Then it had a noble life, she concluded, satisfied. He crouched across from her, still holding one surviving cup, as if it were a rescued civilian. Blue, are you ill? No, she answered softly. Possessed, then? He wondered, almost seriously. Paco, Looking at her incredulously, he pointed to the shelf. Because yesterday, you reorganized the entire shelf because one saucer was facing north with suspicious intent. Bluebell swept the larger pieces into the pan. Yesterday, the saucer had time to reconsider. This cup did not. Paco lowered his voice. That cup received kinder treatment from you than the mayor did. The laugh came out of her before she could stop it. Small, quick, visible. Paco's brows lifted. Bluebell pressed her lips together and looked sternly at the porcelain shards, which deserved none of her embarrassment. It was only a cup, she reminded him. Yes, Paco said. That is what worries me. By late morning, the rush thinned to a manageable bustle. Bluebell was in the kitchen slicing peaches for a syrup when Liana arrived with the speed of a weather change. She came through the back doorway rather than the front, which meant the story had already grown legs and found the alley. Her in at Kalm uniform was neat only in the places required by Broden standards. A ribbon had escaped her red curls and hung near one ear in a way that somehow looked deliberate. Her green eyes went first to Bluebell's face, then to the peaches, then back to Bluebell's face with appalling precision. You, Liana said. Bluebell lifted the knife. Yes? Me? Do not use cutlery to look innocent, Paco told me, her friend started. Paco tells everyone everything. It is a condition, insisted Bluebell. Liana lifted an index toward Bluebell's face. He told me you hummed, Bluebell resumed slicing. The peach yielded beneath the blade, golden and clean. Well, you know Paco. He has always had an active imagination. He told me you forgave a broken cup, Bluebell. The poor cup was dead, retorted Bluebell in an innocent tone. I saw no use in scolding it. Liana came closer, hands planted on the table, bending to inspect Bluebell as if joy might have left crumbs on her collar. You are humming. You are sparing crockery. You have that look. What look? Bluebell wondered. The look of someone with a skeleton in the closet, Liana accused. That is grim, replied her friend passively. Bluebell Parks, do not be practical at me. I was born immune. Bluebell placed the peach slices into a bowl. I am working. Marvelous. Work while confessing, insisted Liana. There is nothing to confess, tried to justify Bluebell. Then deny it. Bluebell frowned. Deny what? Liana smiled slowly. It was the sort of smile that checked door locks. You saw him. Bluebell sprinkled sugar over the peaches. The crystals fell like small, traitorous snow. I see many people. This cafe is a business. You saw Adrian Vale, her friend specified. The name landed differently in Liana's mouth than it did in Bluebell's mind, brighter, louder, wearing a hat with a feather in it. Bluebell stirred the fruit too carefully. He came by after closing, she said. Liana inhaled so sharply that Monsieur, who had wandered in hoping for fish and found theatre instead, paused near the pantry. After closing, Liana repeated. A mercenary after closing, at the door of the demoiselle. I am going to need furniture. This revelation requires sitting. It required half an hour, said Bluebell, trying to calm her friend's enthusiasm. We walked. You walked, indeed, added Liana. Yes, that is the activity where one foot agrees to follow the other, continued Bluebell. Do not define walking to me like I'm an innocent girl, Bluebell Parks. Bluebell turned away to rinse the knife. The water ran over her fingers, cool and reasonable, and did nothing at all to help. It was one walk, she insisted. Then, if it was only a walk, Why does your face look as red as those strawberries?" "Liana." Bluebell said nothing more. She hadn't noticed that her face had flushed. She didn't like it when her emotions were so openly on display to others. "Did you enjoy yourself?" asked Liana. The question should have been easy to parry. Bluebell had a pantry full of useful answers. It was pleasant. He was polite. The canal was pretty. Akira sang too loudly. The stars behaved. Instead, she remembered Adrian's delight when she had said yes, and the answer rose again. Simple and bare. Yes, Bluebell admitted. Liana's expression changed at once. The teasing stayed, because Liana, without teasing, would have been a different species. But beneath it came something fierce and tender. She reached across the table and caught Bluebell's flour-dusted hand. "Good," she said softly. "Good." Bluebell looked at their hands. "He asked to see me again tonight." Liana's softness lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then she made a sound so triumphant that Monsieur fled the kitchen as if hunted by cymbals. "Tonight!" Liana almost screamed. With an amused air, Bluebell motioned for her to lower her voice. "The customers, Liana." But Liana couldn't care less about the customers. She continued. "Tonight," she says, as if announcing a delivery of onions. "Bluebell, this is not onions. This is a development. This is a festival in a waistcoat. This is a full parade with ribbons and drums." "I will send you back to the inn," she warned her cheerfully. "You cannot. I came on my break, and Broden knows I am bringing back a tart." "Then I will send the tart without you," threatened Bluebell. "Cruelty from a woman in love. I knew romance changed people," said Liana, placing a solemn hand on her forehead. "I am not in love," insisted Bluebell. But the words arrived quickly, too quickly. Liana heard the speed and had the decency not to pounce. She squeezed Bluebell's fingers once and released them. "No," Liana said, voice bright again but gentler at the edges. "Not yet. You are looking forward to something. That is dangerous enough for one Saturday." Bluebell folded her hands in her apron. She should have denied that too. Instead, the truth opened in her, shy and warm. "I am," she admitted. Liana's grin softened. There she is. For the rest of the afternoon, work tried bravely to become ordinary and failed by degrees. Bluebell prepared peach syrup, mixed almond batter for small festival cakes, checked the inventory shelf, and copied 3 notes for Laris in a clean hand. She served lunch to a group of travelers who wanted to know whether the road to Chocobo Bill's ranch would be clear by Monday. She told them what Laris had told everyone. The mayor had hired assistants, the roads were improving, and caution was still wiser than pride. She did not say that the assistance was coming for her at evening. The sentence would have broken its cup on the floor for everyone to see. The festival committee returned in the person of Mrs. Pellier's niece, who had a ledger, a pencil, and the expression of a woman prepared to conquer cake logistics. Laris greeted her with admirable courage. Parko burned his thumb on a tray and said 3 words in a sailor's vocabulary that made Bluebell look towards the dining room in alarm. Monsieur stole a ribbon from the festival sample basket and dragged it behind the flour sack like a banner of occupation. Through it all, the clock kept moving. Bluebell tried not to look. Looking was undignified. Looking changed nothing. Looking only told the clock that it had power. She looked anyway. First when the minute hand passed 2, then again at past, then when a customer asked for the time, and she answered, before Laris could cross to the mantel. Her father noticed. He said, nothing at first. Laris had the gift of letting a silence ripen. He stood beside her near the service hatch, while Paco carried plates to the terrace. And Liana's promised tart cooled on the counter, wrapped in paper and tied with string. "Will Mr. Vale be coming this evening?" he asked. Bluebell reached for a spoon that was not there. She found it in the sugar jar, which suggested her hands had made political decisions without her mind. "Yes, I think so." "You think so?" He wondered with genuine curiosity. "He said he would," she replied simply. "Then I suspect he will. He seems attached to keeping promises once he has cornered them." She glanced at him. Laris's face held no mockery. There was concern there, of course. He was her father. Concern lived in him like a second spine. But it was practical, quiet, more lamp than cage. "We will not be late," Bluebell said. "That was not my question, sweetheart." "It was waiting behind your question, Papa." His mouth curved. "Perhaps." She wiped a spot of syrup from the counter. "I do not know where we are going." He said there would be a surprise. Laris did not look entirely comforted by this, but he accepted it, with the bravery of a man allowing his daughter to step into a street he could not sweep clean ahead of her. "Take your shawl. The wind changes after sunset," he told her. "I know." Laris gave her a fatherly look. "And if you become uncomfortable, you come home. No explanations owed to anyone." Bluebell's hand stilled on the cloth. The words settled in her more deeply than they should have. No explanations owed. It sounded simple enough to belong on a kitchen shelf beside salt. It did not feel simple. "I know," she said again, softer. Laris brushed a knuckle against her shoulder, quick and light. Good. By the time the afternoon turned gold, Bluebell had no more useful excuses. She climbed the stairs with her apron still tied, as if the cloth might persuade evening to wait politely. In her room, the light had softened over everything. The Queen's blood boxes caught a bronze edge on the shelf. The cornflowers had drooped farther, their blue heads bowed with the drama of elderly poets. Monsieur leaped onto the bed and sat in the exact center of it, offering himself as an obstacle to vanity. "Move," Bluebell said. He did not. "Monsieur, I must dress." He blinked, unconvinced that clothing had improved civilization. Bluebell untied the apron slowly. The first pull loosened cloth. The second pull loosened the version of herself that had known where to stand all day. She hung the apron over the chair and opened the wardrobe. The wardrobe was a practical country with poor diplomacy. Work dresses, Sunday dresses, a grey dress for rain, a white dress for funerals or formal teas, neither of which seemed appropriate, and both of which made her step back. The green dress from last night hung at the end, still carrying the memory of canal air and Adrian's expression when she had come down the stairs. She touched the sleeve and smiled despite herself. Not that one. Not because it was wrong, but because last night deserved to remain itself. There were few dresses for this new country between being useful and being seen. Bluebell considered this unfair of her wardrobe, and then, with startling clarity, unfair of herself. She had dressed for work, weather, propriety, grief, and comfort. She owned nothing that said, "I want to be here," without either shouting or hiding. Liana would have been scandalized by the deficiency. Bluebell found, to her surprise, that she agreed. "We must remedy this," she told Monsieur. He began washing one paw, unmoved by the economic future of dresses. At last, Bluebell chose a pale lavender dress. with a narrow waist, simple buttons, and sleeves light enough for summer evening. She had bought it 2 years ago for the festival, and then worn her blue dress instead, because lavender seemed too ready to be noticed. Tonight, it looked less dangerous. Or perhaps danger had changed colour. She brushed her hair until it felt smooth and loose, then pinned back only the front with 2 pearl clips. Last night, the clips had felt like borrowed courage. Tonight, they felt like a decision. She dabbed perfume at her wrists with less ceremony and more wonder. The lipstick remained troublesome, not because it was bold, but because it was honest. She applied a little more than last night, then took some away, then laughed at herself because the mirror had seen everything and would not be impressed by negotiations. The young woman looking back was still Bluebell Parks. Small, fair, grey-blue eyes a little too wide, mouth trying to decide whether joy was permitted to stay. But she seemed less startled by her own reflection. A person could change by inches and still feel the room turn. When she descended, the cafe was nearly closed. Lamps had been lit along the walls. The tables were clean. Paco stood behind the counter, pretending to wrap leftover scones with the intense focus of a jeweller. Laris moved near the hearth. Monsieur had somehow arrived before her and sat on the counter, where he was forbidden and therefore powerful. Paco looked up first. This time the joke did not die entirely. It stumbled, but survived. "Lavender," he said, "the festival committee will accuse us of raising standards." Bluebell stopped on the final stair. "I can go back and wear an apron if that would soothe public expectations." "No," he said too quickly, then smiled down at the paper in his hands. "Public expectations deserve confusion." Laris turned. Something in his face softened, with a pain so old it had learned manners. For one foolish heartbeat, Bluebell wondered whether he saw Amira. Then he smiled at her as her father, and the thought folded itself away. The bell rang. Adrian entered with evening at his back. He had cleaned the road from himself as much as a mercenary could. His dark coat had been brushed. The tear near his sleeve had been mended, roughly but honestly. His hair, dark brown and still wind-touched, fell near the scar across his left eyebrow. His broadsword rested at his back, wrapped and buckled with practical care. When he saw Bluebell, he did not speak at once. His steel-blue eyes changed before his mouth did, and the silence that followed was not Paco's stunned confusion. It was attention, the kind that made a person feel less displayed than found. "Good evening," Adrian said. "Good evening," Bluebell answered, and was absurdly pleased that her voice behaved. He glanced at Laris. "Mr. Parks, I will have her back before the hour becomes unreasonable." "Hours are more unreasonable than they admit," Laris said, "but I appreciate the effort." Adrian looked at Bluebell again. He seemed proud of something, nearly boyish with the effort of keeping it contained. "I promised colour." "So you did," she replied. "The rusty arrow is not elegant," Adrian started, "but it is very committed." Paco made a small sound that might have been a cough or a laugh. Bluebell ignored him because dignity needed defenders. "The rusty arrow?" she asked. "Only the beginning. There is a surprise," he reminded her. "You are very fond of withholding information," she pointed out. "Only cheerful information," he specified. "Grim information I deliver promptly, with references." Laris took Bluebell's shawl from the back of a chair and handed it to her. She accepted it, her fingers brushing his. He squeezed once and released. Outside, Kalm had entered the golden seam between day and night. The canal carried broken pieces of lamp glow. People moved through the streets in easy Saturday clusters, their voices softer now that heat had loosened from the stones. A pair of children chased each other past the flower beds, while their mother called warnings that neither child treated as legally binding. The Marco tank hummed in the square, a low current beneath the village's evening pleasures. Adrian walked beside Bluebell, not too close. He let the first few steps belong to quiet. "How was the road today?" she asked at last. "Busy," he said. "Not with leprechauns this time. Toxirats near the old warehouse track. They had been nesting under a broken cart and running at the wheels when merchants passed. Poison in the bite, panic in the chocobos, then panic in the drivers, and after that, everyone blames the road, as if the road planned it." Bluebell pictured small bodies darting from scrub and dust, frightened animals frightening larger ones. "Were they attacking people?" "Yes," Adrian answered. "A boy from Oliver's farm was nearly bitten yesterday. His boot took most of it. Lucky boot. Bad morning for the boot." "What happened to them?" asked Bluebell. Adrian's mouth lost a little of its brightness. He heard the question beneath the question. "I drove off what I could, killed what I had to." They passed beneath a line of hanging flower baskets, bluebells, white alyssum, little red blossoms she did not know. Their petals trembled in the evening air. "That sounds very clean when people say it," she said. "It isn't," he acknowledged. She looked at him. Adrian unbuckled the lower strap of the broadsword, just enough to shift it forward. He did not draw the weapon fully in the street. Instead, he angled the hilt where she could see the fitted slot near the guard. A green orb rested there, veined with light. No, not green. Blue-green at the center, brightening to white when the evening touched it. The thunder materia looked less like a jewel than weather trapped in a thought. "This helps," he said. "Toxirats scatter from lightning. Most beasts do. If I aim well, the fight ends faster." The materia pulsed faintly. Bluebell had seen materia before in shop windows and on travelers' belts, little worlds of power carried as jewelry, tools, promises. This close, seated in a sword, it seemed beautiful in a way she did not trust. A storm made obedient, a storm asked to serve metal. "It is lovely," she said, because it was. "And ugly," Adrian said, because he had noticed. Her fingers tightened on her shawl. "I did not say that." "You did not have to," he added. They walked on. The road curved toward the lower streets, where the rusty arrow kept its entrance beneath a stone arch, half hidden from the respectable posture of the square. Adrian did not fill the quiet with glory. He did not describe the killing in larger shapes to make himself larger too. Instead, he pointed out a dog sleeping in a doorway with such complete abandonment that Bluebell had to smile. "That," he said, "is the true master of Kalm." "Monsieur would object," she said, with a frank smile. "Monsieur objects to rivals?" Adrian wondered. Bluebell recalled the unique characteristics of her cat. "Well, Monsieur objects to weather, chairs, hunger, closed doors, and being mistaken for a cat." "What does he consider himself?" he asked. "A standard to which the world fails to rise," replied Bluebell. Adrian laughed, and the sound carried them down the steps into the rusty arrow. The bar lived below the street, as if Kalm had grown a second heart underground and decided to light it with amber glass. Bluebell had been there only twice, both times to collect Laris from conversations that had become longer than intended. She remembered the ceiling beams, the damp stone walls, the smell of beer, old wood, frying onions, and lamp oil. Tonight the place had transformed. Tables had been pushed into rows. Boards lay open across them, dark squares marked for battle. Cards flashed between fingers. Voices rose and fell in little storms of triumph and despair. At the far wall, a chalk sign announced Saturday Queen's Blood Night, in letters much less careful than Bluebell's and much more convinced of themselves. For one breath, she forgot to be composed. Adrian saw it and grinned. Surprise? Bluebell turned to him. How did you know? I didn't, not exactly. He looked pleased enough to be forgiven in advance. You mentioned last night that you collect cards, but do not play. Then this morning, while trying to find a merchant whose cart had vanished into a ditch, I heard two men arguing about tonight's tournament. One said the rusty arrow would be colourful. I remembered my promise. You remembered I collect Queen's blood, she said, genuinely surprised. Bluebell, you described collecting as an alternative to courage. I was not likely to forget. She looked back at the boards. A man with a magnificent moustache slapped a card down and declared victory too soon, because the woman across from him smiled like a knife and placed her next card in silence. At another table, two boys argued over a rule, while an old woman corrected both without looking up from her beer. The cards themselves shone in hands and lamplight. Monsters and soldiers and strange creatures arranged into tiny wars. I have a vintage board, Bluebell said, the confession escaping as if the room had opened the box inside her. In my room. It belonged to my mother, I think, though father never says. I keep it wrapped. I have cards from traders, festivals, old shop lots, even 3 from a sailor Paco knew in Costa del Sol. But I hardly ever play. Adrian's eyes warmed. Then you have been keeping a battlefield in boxes. A well-organized battlefield, she specified. That is the dangerous kind, he replied. Do you play? She asked him. Often, he started to explain. Badly when tired, decently when fed, and magnificently in my own memory. I don't collect much, too much travelling. Cards dislike rain. Cards dislike being bent, Bluebell said, imagining with horror a ruined card. Also losing, they tell me constantly, added Adrian. A serving girl passed with a tray of drinks. Adrian ordered 1 beer for himself, and lemonade for Bluebell after she chose it without apology. That pleased her. She had expected, vaguely, to feel childish beside his beer. Instead, the glass arrived bright and cold, smelling of lemon rind and sugar, and seemed perfectly capable of belonging to her. Adrian led her to a smaller table near the edge of the tournament, not in the loudest centre, not in a corner where she might feel observed by absence. He found a spare board, shuffled a modest deck, and spread the cards with a reverence that made Bluebell's fingers itch to straighten them. First lesson, he said, you are allowed to lose. That seems like a poor lesson, Bluebell insinuated. It is the only lesson that lets the others breathe, added the mercenary. She sat across from him and touched the back of a card. The worn edge met her fingertip like the corner of an old book. What if I lose very badly? She asked. Then I will act impressed by the boldness of your disaster, he said, trying to motivate her. Bluebell sighed with an elegance she was unaware of projecting. I can already regret this. He looked at her with amusement. Excellent. Regret is practically strategy. The first game was not a game so much as Bluebell being introduced to several ways a board could betray a person. Adrian explained only what she needed, territory, power, placement, pressure. He did not drown her in rules. He let her turn cards in her hands, study their art, read the values printed in the corners, and ask why one card mattered more in a humble place than a glorious one. Because glorious places are often traps, he said. That sounds personal, she answered. Everything in Queen's blood sounds personal after the third round, he pointed out. He won quickly, not cruelly. It happened with a neatness that made Bluebell blink at the board and then at him. You were very calm about that, she complimented him. The board was doing most of the shouting, he replied. I dislike the board, admitted Bluebell, still amused by the game. That means you are ready for the second lesson, insisted Adrian. Which is? Asked Bluebell, at once fearful and intrigued. Learning to accept defeat, he replied jokingly. She laughed into her lemonade and almost choked. Adrian looked proud, which was becoming an unfortunate pattern. The second game lasted longer. Around them, the rusty arrow rose and dipped. Someone cheered when the mustached man lost again. Gills clicked against wood. A news box near the bar murmured beneath the noise, words dissolving into static. Shinra, weather, road notices, market fluctuations. Nothing with enough force to command the room. Bluebell placed one card badly and knew it at once. Adrian's eyebrow lifted. She placed the next card carefully, not to win the lane but to ruin his plan in the lane beside it. He sat back. That was rude. Was it? She asked cautiously. Very. I am delighted. Then Bluebell took a second to look attentively at the card. The creature on that card is from the eastern marshes, she said, turning it lightly. This printing is older. See the border? The newer editions give it silver vines. The old ones have black reeds. Adrian looked down, then back at her. You knew that without playing? Collecting is not dust and cowardice alone, she pointed out to him with humor. I never called it cowardice, he defended himself. I did. It was rude of me, Bluebell admitted. He smiled. Then apologize to your cards when you get home. She lost again, but by less. The loss did not land as humiliation. It became a door she had opened incorrectly, a recipe that needed another attempt, a conversation with stakes made of cardboard and pride. She discovered that making a choice and watching it fail did not tear the room apart. It only made Adrian lean closer, point with 2 fingers, and say, There. That was the moment the board asked whether you wanted safety or teeth. Boards should mind their own business, she implied. They never do, Adrian said, softly. The third game she did not win, but she took one lane from him so cleanly that the old woman at the next table glanced over and said, About time someone bloodied the pretty mercenary. Adrian lifted his beer in salute. Bluebell hid her smile behind lemonade and failed completely. By the time they left the Rusty Arrow, the night had deepened and cooled. The bar's amber roar closed behind them, leaving the street almost tender. Bluebell felt the laughter in her chest, the lemonade on her tongue, the knowledge that she had lost 3 games and somehow gained something she could not name. Her hands smelled faintly of old cards. Adrian paused at the foot of the steps. Do you trust me for one more stop? The question was easy and not easy at all. Bluebell looked at him. He had asked it lightly, but he was not careless with her answer. That mattered. Every small permission mattered. How high is the stop? She asked. His grin returned. Moderately, he qualified it. She shrugged. That is a mercenary word for too high, I guess. It is a hopeful word for the clock tower, he announced. She looked toward the tower rising above the rooftops, its dark outline stitched into the sky. During the day, it belonged to Kalm's postcards and meeting places, a proper old tower with a clock face polished by tourist admiration. At night, it seemed taller, less decorative, more honest about stone. I have not climbed it in years, she said. Then we go slowly, he added, offering his hand. She accepted it with confidence and a racing heart she tried to calm within herself. They walked through quieter streets. The village had folded most of itself indoors. Light glowed behind curtains. A gondola rocked gently against its post. From somewhere in the distance came laughter, then a door closing, then only the water and their footsteps. The Mako tank hummed as they crossed the square, the sound woven so deeply into Kalm that Bluebell almost did not hear it, until Adrian looked toward it. Does it ever stop? He asked. No, she replied, like the girl she was used to it. Do people notice? Not unless it changes, Bluebell said. He added nothing to that, and the silence that followed was not empty. The tower door stood beneath an arch near the old municipal wall. Adrian lifted the latch, and they entered a narrow stairwell smelling of dust, cold stone, and dry wood. The climb began in half-light. Their steps echoed upward. Bluebell had to tear herself away from Adrian's hand, reluctantly. She held her skirts in one hand and the rail in the other. Adrian went ahead only where the stair narrowed, then waited at each landing, letting her set the pace as promised. Through small slit windows, Kalm appeared in pieces. A roof with 2 chimneys, a canal bright with reflected lamps, the square reduced to a pattern of light, the Mako tank glowing softly at its center. Her legs complained by the final turn. Her stomach had begun another conversation entirely. Still alive? Adrian asked. Ask me again when stairs have been abolished, she replied. I will support the cause, he promised. At the top, the tower opened into wind. Bluebell stepped onto the viewing platform and stopped. Kalm spread below in lanterns, roofs, canals, and garden shadows. The Demoiselle Café was a warm rectangle along the water, small enough from here to fit between 2 fingers and large enough to pull at her heart. Beyond the village, the grasslands lay dark and breathing. Farther still on the horizon, Midgar waited. At night, the city looked unreal, a crown of iron and Mako light, plates layered against the sky, towers pricking the darkness, reactors arranged like hard stars around the rim. From Kalm, Midgar was always distant enough to become an idea. Progress, opportunity, danger, Shinra, a place people escaped from, returned to, praised, feared, defended. Tonight, beneath the high wind and the enormous sky, it looked close enough to reach with a thought, and far enough to deny any claim upon her. Bluebell leaned against the stone wall. The wind lifted loose strands of hair against her cheek. It is strange, she said. Midgar? Adrian wondered. Everything, Bluebell answered, gently. Adrian stood beside her, leaving space between their shoulders. That is a large accusation. Accurate, though, she added. She looked down at the village again. The clock machinery ticked behind them, slow and deep, gears moving in the wooden housing, like an old creature turning in sleep. Bluebell felt very small. She also felt, in some impossible way, more exactly herself than she had inside her own room. No apron, no counter, no customer waiting with a spoon, raised like a legal claim. No cup to rescue, only stone beneath her hands, wind at her mouth. Adrian beside her, and the whole distance to Midgar refusing to be tidy. When I was younger, she said, surprising herself, I thought wanting something meant it would either disappear or become too much. So it was safer to want things that stayed where I put them. Books, cards, recipes, cornflowers, even though they die quickly and make poor arguments for permanence. Adrian's voice was quiet. And now? She should not have answered. But the tower seemed to have removed several doors from inside her. Now I think perhaps wanting can be a kind of movement. He did not rush into the space she had opened. He let the words settle. That steadiness undid her more than any compliment could have. Paco came to her then, not in guilt, not in longing, but as a small bright thing seen from a train window, after the train has begun to move. Paco sweeping the floor before dawn. Paco laughing over apricots. Paco stunned on the stairs when her green dress had turned his language to crumbs. For 2 years, he had been the safe impossible. The story she could tell herself because it required nothing. A hummingbird in a closed room, quick and pretty, never landing long enough to ask for change. Bluebell felt tenderness for that old ache. It had kept her company. It had asked nothing she could not refuse. But beside Adrian, the room had opened. The hummingbird flew out, and in the space it left, 1,000 butterflies lifted their ridiculous wings. She almost laughed. She almost cried. But her eyes were bright and reflecting the moon's light. Adrian turned toward her. The wind moved his hair across his brow, briefly hiding the scar there. Without the bar's noise, without the street's lamps below them, he looked less like the mercenary Kalm had hired, and more like a young man gathering courage with both hands. Bluebell, he said. Her name had changed again. Not dangerous this time. True. Yes. He lifted one hand, then stopped before touching her. May I? The question was so small. The whole night seemed to balance on it. Bluebell looked at his hand, at his face, at Midgar's hard lights behind him. She could have answered with wit. She could have hidden inside a correction. She could have said that the hour was late, that stairs were unreasonable, that Monsieur would file a complaint. Instead, she stepped closer. Adrian's fingers touched her cheek with care that made her breath catch. His hand was warm despite the wind, rough at the palm, gentle at the edge of her jaw. He waited one more heartbeat. The space between them trembled, not from fear exactly, but from the size of choosing. Bluebell rose onto her toes because she wanted to. Adrian bent because he had understood. Their lips met softly. It was not music, not lightning, not any of the absurd comparisons novels smuggled into girls' heads and left there to cause trouble. It was warmer and stranger than that. A mouth against hers, the faint taste of beer and night air, the pressure of his thumb near her cheekbone, her own hands uncertain for half a second, then finding the front of his coat. A kiss, ordinary enough to belong to human bodies, and astonishing enough to tilt the world. Bluebell forgot the tower, then remembered it all at once. Stone underfoot, wind in her hair, the clock's slow tick, Midgar on the horizon, Adrian's breath when he drew back, only far enough to look at her. She did not know what her face revealed. Something, surely, because his expression went soft with wonder. Was that all right? He asked. The question broke her open in a new way, kinder and more devastating than the kiss. Bluebell rested her forehead briefly against his shoulder, because looking at him directly had become difficult. Yes, she said. His arm came around her, careful, not trapping, only there. She leaned into him. The leather of his coat was cool from the wind, but beneath it he was warm. his shoulder fit against her cheek as if the body could discover an answer, before language finished drafting one. She closed her eyes. For one shining second, vulnerability did not feel like a door left unlocked. It felt like a window opened to summer air. Then, the horizon flashed. Bluebell saw the light through her closed lids first, a sudden turquoise bloom turning darkness green. She opened her eyes, far beyond Kalm, where Midgar had been a crown of hard lights. Something swelled upward from the city's rim. Blue-green fire rose in silence. It unfolded like a flower made of wrong weather, beautiful for the length of a single breath before beauty became impossible. Adrian's arm tightened around her. What is that? The sound had not arrived yet. The light widened. A wave moved across the low clouds above Midgar, staining them Marco-bright, then white at the center. One of the city's reactors, or something near one, had become a wound in the dark. Bluebell stared. Her mind refused to place the sight among known things. The Mako tank's hum in Kalm seemed suddenly tiny, a domestic insect beside a giant's scream. Then the roar reached them. It came late and enormous, rolling over the grasslands, striking the tower stones through Bluebell's feet. The clock face shuddered. Metal groaned inside the mechanism. Birds burst from the roof below, in a frantic black scatter. Somewhere in Kalm, a dog began to bark, then another. Windows opened. A woman's voice rose from the square, thin with alarm. Bluebell could not move. The turquoise light filled her eyes, and beneath it another light flickered, older, hotter. Smoke. Not the clean smoke of the cafe hearth. Thick smoke, bitter smoke, heat on her face, stone trembling, the sky full of stars and sparks. Someone crying, far away and too near. A hand pulling her, a voice saying her name, or not her name, or a name that broke before it reached her. She was small. She was not small. She was on the clock tower with Adrian's arm around her. She was somewhere else with dust in her mouth. She smelled burning. She smelled wind. She heard the distant city roar. She heard, beneath it, a memory with no words. Bluebell. Adrian's voice came from beside her, low and urgent. Look at me. She tried. For a moment his face wavered between the turquoise glare and the old orange dark her body remembered without permission. His hands held her shoulders, steady but not forceful. Breathe, he said. You are here. You are in Kalm. Kalm. The word reached her like a rope thrown across water. She drew in air. It shook on the way down. Below, the village was waking into fragments. Doors, voices, the bell of the demoiselle, perhaps, or only metal startled by the blast. The Mako tank's hum continued, unchanged, obscene in its calm. Midgar burned on the horizon, blue-green and terrible, shedding light over the grasslands as if day had been injured and forced open. Bluebell gripped the stone wall. Adrian stood beside her, one hand still at her back. No longer lover alone, no longer guide to games and towers, but the only solid thing between her and the sky. Her lips still held the memory of her first kiss. Her body held the echo of an old fear she could not name. Across the distance, Midgar's wound glowed brighter, and Bluebell, caught at the edge of joy and history, could only watch the horizon split open. This is the end of Chapter 7 of The Blue Flower, a fan fiction in the universe of Final Fantasy VII. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. Like and subscribe if you wish to support our channel. And let's meet very soon for the next chapter. Take care of yourself and be kind to others.